She entered the Forbidden City at 16 as a concubine of the 6th rank. The 6th rank was the second lowest position in an 8-tier system. She had no money, no political connections, and no obvious path forward. 47 years later, she was the most powerful person in China. She had outlived 2 emperors, staged 2 coups, and ordered the death of a nephew. She had thrown a rival concubine down a well on her direct command. She rebuilt the Summer Palace using funds meant to defend China from Japan. She had banned foot binding, introduced electricity, and modernized an empire. She had done all of it from inside a system that gave her no official authority. Her name was Cixi, and the story most people know gets almost everything wrong. This is what that life actually cost her and the people around her. Cixi was selected as a concubine of Emperor Xianfeng in 1852 at age 16. She was assigned to the 6th rank, which carried minimal privileges and almost no visibility. The imperial record described her family as government employees with no exceptional standing. Nothing about her entry into the palace suggested what would follow. What separated her from thousands of other concubines in those early years was not beauty. It was her literacy in a court where most concubines could not read official documents. Emperor Xianfeng suffered from declining health and increasingly relied on written communications. Cixi positioned herself as someone who could read imperial dispatches aloud and draft responses. This was an extraordinary intrusion for a concubine of her rank. The emperor initially found her presumptuous and had her formally reprimanded. He nevertheless continued using her because she was genuinely useful to the running of the court. In 1856, she gave birth to his only surviving son. That single birth transformed her position in the palace entirely and immediately. The mother of the heir to the throne could not be treated as an ordinary concubine. Her rank was elevated and her access to the emperor increased substantially. She used that access with a precision the imperial court had not anticipated. She began attending formal audiences from behind a screen, as was custom for court women. She began offering alternatives to decisions through trusted intermediaries. The emperor called her crafty and cunning in private correspondence that survived his death. He was right about her in a way he never lived to fully understand. Emperor Xianfeng died in 1861, leaving a 6-year-old son on the throne. The imperial council appointed 8 senior male officials to serve as regents. Cixi's position as the boy's mother gave her ceremonial status and no formal power. The regents made clear they intended to govern without consulting either Empress Dowager. What the regents did not understand was that Cixi had been preparing for this moment. She had cultivated relationships with 2 of the late emperor's brothers over years. Prince Gong controlled military forces in Beijing. Prince Chun had married Cixi's younger sister and owed her personal loyalty. Together with Empress Dowager Cixi, they planned what history calls the Xinyu coup. The regents were arrested while the court was still formally in mourning. 3 were ordered to commit suicide by imperial decree. A 4th was publicly executed for resisting the new order. The remaining 4 were stripped of all titles and dismissed entirely. Cixi achieved all of this at 25 years old while nominally confined to grief. The coup was so swift that most officials did not understand what had happened until it was over. She now controlled China in the name of a child who would spend his life trying to escape her. She ruled from behind a yellow screen at formal audiences for the duration of her reign. The emperor sat in front of the screen and repeated what she told him through it. Officials addressed their remarks to the emperor while she directed every response. The fiction of male rule was maintained perfectly, and the actual power sat behind the screen. Every formal decision had to pass through a male official or a sitting emperor. Cixi built a system of intermediaries that gave her complete control without visible authority. It was the most effective political arrangement in Qing dynasty history, and it ran entirely on a lie that everyone in the room agreed to maintain. What the official record does not contain is what holding that position actually did to her. Inside her private quarters, the system of control was total and entirely turned inward. She was served 120 different dishes at each meal. She would eat 2 or 3 bites of a small number of them and nothing more. The reason was not appetite, but fear. The woman who had ordered poisonings was herself terrified of being poisoned at every meal. She had her own private kitchen built separately from the main imperial kitchen. Its staff could produce 4,000 different dishes and 400 varieties of pastry. All of it existed so that she could eat 2 bites and push the plate away. Her bedroom was 15 square meters in a palace complex of over 70 hectares. Inside that small room, she kept 15 ticking clocks running simultaneously. Europeans who visited described the noise as entirely unbearable. Cixi slept through it every night without difficulty. She also took midnight walks through the summer palace gardens when she could not sleep. Eunuchs followed with lanterns, though she often preferred to walk in the moonlight alone. The most feared person in China walked her gardens in the dark because she found it calming. The official record did not capture whether the midnight walks helped or whether the fear at meals ever went away. When her son Tongji came of age, he found the palace walls intolerable. Cixi had separated him from his wife and directed him toward a concubine he despised. Unable to assert any authority inside the court, he began to escape it. A eunuch secretly helped the young emperor slip out of the forbidden city at night. Tongji disguised himself as a commoner and visited the brothels of Beijing for several evenings. His activities became known to court officials and to commoners across the city. Cixi discovered what was happening through her network of palace informants. She considered it a scandal that could not be acknowledged publicly without consequence. When Tongji fell gravely ill, the court physicians examined him and understood the cause. The diagnosis was syphilis contracted during his nights outside the palace walls. The physicians knew that reporting this to Cixi carried serious personal risk. They recorded the illness as smallpox in the official imperial medical documents. The prescribed treatment followed the smallpox protocol rather than the actual disease. Tongji died in 1875 at the age of 18, without producing an heir. Most historians believe the smallpox diagnosis was false and the wrong treatment killed him. The concealment Cixi ordered to protect her reputation destroyed the son she had used to gain power. She built the most controlled court in China, and it destroyed the one person she was supposed to protect. When Emperor Guangxu came of age and assumed formal power in 1889, Cixi nominally retired. She moved to the Summer Palace and continued making every significant decision through officials. In 1898, Guangxu attempted sweeping modernization reforms without consulting her. She returned to power within days and placed him under house arrest on an island palace. He remained there for the 10 remaining years of his life. She had his favorite concubine Pearl thrown down a well in 1900 during the flight from Beijing. Pearl had encouraged Guangxu to resist Cixi and refused a direct order to commit suicide. The order Cixi gave in response was carried out by eunuchs within the hour. Cixi's control over the eunuch corps was one of the most effective instruments of her authority. It was also the instrument that would define the final hours of Guangxu's life. Empress Dowager Cixi died on November 15, 1908. Emperor Guangxu had died on November 14, 1908, 22 hours before her. The official cause of Guangxu's death was recorded as sudden illness. That explanation satisfied almost nobody at the time and no serious historian since. In 2008, Chinese scientists tested Guangxu's remains 100 years after his death. The arsenic concentration in his bones was 2,000 times higher than ordinary levels. Scientists concluded the dose was administered in a single large quantity rather than gradually. The report confirmed deliberate poisoning, but did not officially name who gave the order. Historical accounts preserved a specific detail about the morning of November 14, 1908. Cixi's chief eunuch Li Lianying left her private chambers carrying a special bowl of yogurt. The bowl was bound for the emperor's quarters on the island palace. Guangxu began showing acute symptoms within hours of receiving it. Cixi had long understood that Guangxu would reverse everything she had built if he outlived her. She was terminally ill herself in November 1908 and knew she had very little time remaining. She named a 2-year-old great-nephew as the next emperor before she died. She arranged the succession, the regency, and the transition of authority in her final days. Everything was organized to continue without her before she allowed herself to stop. She died the following afternoon with everything arranged. The Qing dynasty lasted 4 more years before collapsing under Republican pressure. On her deathbed, she issued a final imperial decree. The decree stated that women must never again be permitted to involve themselves in state affairs. It stated that this prohibition was to be strictly enforced going forward without exception. She had held political power for 47 years without ever officially being allowed to hold it. Her last official act was to forbid everything she had spent 47 years proving was possible. Cixi's historical reputation was built largely by people with strong reasons to destroy it. The reformist writer Kang Youwei fled China after the 1898 crackdown and wrote from exile. His accounts portrayed Cixi as a corrupt obstacle blocking every attempt at Chinese progress. These accounts circulated widely in Western press and became the foundation of her mythology. Kang Youwei was her direct political enemy, and his accounts were often impossible to verify. She abolished foot binding in 1902 after 2,000 years of the practice continuing. She established schools for women and sent the first Chinese diplomatic envoys abroad. She introduced electricity to the Forbidden City and supported railway and telegraph development. She was also genuinely ruthless in ways no revised account should minimize. She ordered political killings and placed personal loyalty consistently above institutional competence. Both her accomplishments and her failures were entirely real and entirely simultaneous. She was the most capable political operator the Qing dynasty produced in its final century. She entered the Forbidden City as a number on a selection list with no prospects. She left it having run the largest country on Earth for nearly half a century. The gap between those two facts is the entire story, and she spent her last breath telling the world that someone like her should never have existed.